So tonight I want to follow up a little on last time, talking about watching the mind. And if you need any kind of motivation to practice, to get a little concentrated, to string a few moments of awareness together, you need to be able to have a little bit of stability to be able to watch the mind. So as I was, I'm always pointing to this when we're here in the break. I'm always saying awareness is present. Awareness is not something you create by meditating. Awareness is allowing you to have experience right now. And this experience is appearing to you through the senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, sensing with the body. And then the sixth sense is the mind. What's appearing in the mind. So things appear through the senses, right? Experience appears through the senses, but experience also appears in the mind. So that was something that, when the Buddha was talking about the senses, he included the mind as a sense in that way. The sixth sense. It's not like the woo-woo sixth sense. It's another way that contact happens. So you see something that's contact. Right? It's appearing to you. And things appear in the mind. So until we practice, we don't really have so much of an experience of what's happening internally appearing. It's just like, I need to go do this and become this, and so-and-so's a jerk, and I wish everybody else would change. I wish I would change. Those are all thoughts. But before we're practicing, those are not events that are happening. That's just the way it is. And so in meditation circles, you always hear that phrase, as it is. That's not the as it is we're talking about. It's like you think something and that's the way it is for you. So when we're practicing in this way, what's happening in the mind becomes an event that can be witnessed in awareness, can be noticed, because it's appearing. That's really important. It's really important because this is the way to freedom from the constructs that you live inside of, the constructs you inherited, the constructs you created as a child about so many things. About how the world is, about who you are, those kind of things. So watching the mind is not a little thing. I would say it's one of the, maybe the most important thing. To be interested in, and to have the capacity to know what's arising in here. And not just know it like you know that it's happening. A lot of people have that amount of awareness. They're like, oh, I know I'm thinking the same thing over and over again. I know I'm always... That's a good beginning. But we want you to be able to be aware of that thought in its appearing, to be able to stay with it as it's here, to notice how it shapes your perception, to notice how it gives rise to all kinds of feelings in the body that are coherent with that thought. say you have some very depressing thought about the future, some very bleak thought that arises about the state of the world or about your life. That thought arises. If you're practicing in that moment, which means if you're aware, you could notice that arise. If you didn't notice it arise, you could notice the effects of it. Like you might start noticing feeling bad. It's the energy sinking. You're like, everything starts looking bleak. And then you might look for the thought. Oh yeah, and then you can find it. So sometimes you notice the thought first, sometimes you notice what the thought has given rise to in the body. It's kind of important. So that's different than just knowing you're thinking. Does that make sense, that kind of knowing? So it's like, a lot of people who don't practice but are you'd say, oh, so-and-so's pretty self-aware. They know what's going on but don't have degrees of freedom around it. All of us have been in that place. You know, oh, I keep doing the same thing over and over again. I keep thinking the same thing about myself over and over again. Oh, I'm always having this story over and over again. But it doesn't help to know it. In fact, it kind of, or maybe it helps some, but actually it almost makes it more painful because you're feeling the non-freedom. When there's some stability in wakefulness, we can be aware of experience as experience coming and going. Through the senses, we can be aware of sights moving and changing. People, this is fun to do, people watching. Just watch people go by. Okay, that's awareness, that's steady awareness. You're aware in seeing. Not aware, you can say I'm aware of seeing, but you're aware in seeing. That's lucid awareness. Real-time awareness. Real-time awareness is different than like, oh yeah, I was watching the people go by. Real-time is, oh, here we are. That's subtly, but it's profoundly different. So we can have that with seeing, with hearing. Now, how often does that happen when somebody's saying something to you, you're having a difficult conversation? How often are you aware of hearing what's being said? Not that often, I guess. That'd be my guess. You're so taken with the content that you're not aware of like the sounds, making contact with the ear, and then the feelings coming. That's the sequence. That's how it happens. Right? So it's good to be able to be aware of the contact as it's happening through the. In the Buddhist texts, they have all these weird terms like the ear door. Don't use that in regular conversation. You're making contact with my ear door. That's what's happening. This contact. That's very empowering when you start to notice. Oh, there's sounds, or maybe you're meditating and some sounds. The person next to you is whatever, mumbling or breathing very loudly or rustling around a lot. There's sound in the ear or making contact, and then there's feelings that arise. So your job when you're meditating, what's your job? Be quiet. No, it's not to say be quiet. It's to notice, hearing, and then the reaction that happens internally. Maybe then you start having thoughts about it. How come don't they know this is meditation? How come I'm pissed off about this? I'm supposed to be open-hearted and aware. Whatever the reaction is, to be aware of it in real time. That's watching the mind. We're aware in the environment, aware in hearing, aware in seeing, aware in contact, aware in tasting. I say aware in so that you don't pop out of experience and try to look at it from some vantage point. No, we want to be aware in being here. And then aware in thinking, or aware with just go after what you want. You can notice, oh, wanting. Or you can notice craving. Or you can notice even before that maybe, you can notice a feeling tone, a feeling of like something's not complete or missing, and then watch yourself go crave. Go seek for something. So this is what we're doing in practice. This is the curriculum. But we have to be able to notice these experiences as experiences and include them really fully. So a lot of what people call self-awareness is creating stories about what you notice. And that is not unuseful, that can be useful. But when we're practicing in this way, we're actually just watching the mind, like, what is a story? What is a belief? How do they form an experience? And how is my experience shaped in the present? Anything that moves in experience, when you're sitting here, there's something that's moving and something that's not moving. Awareness knows the movement. Or you could say something. This is where words get tricky, but some aspect of mind or of heart which is steady and still and ever present, knows the movement. The movement arises as experience. So the movement is known in awareness. So watch your mind move. When you're sitting here, watch the mind move. Don't try to stop it. Keep it from moving. A lot of people think that's what you're trying to do when you're meditating. Stop the mind from moving. And that's very unnatural. You'll really cause yourself a lot of grief. Just like so much of the time people are trying to interfere with what's arising in their experience. It's like, it's not okay, it should be different. So you're creating internal tension. I shouldn't be frustrated. I shouldn't be needing or feel like I need. I shouldn't be upset. I shouldn't be reactive. That's a good one. People get really reactive to being reactive. Shouldn't be reactive. We're always pushing and pulling on this. We want to start to let awareness just receive what's happening as it is. So you'd say your nature, something vivid and stable, is knowing the process and the content, moment by moment. The process and the content is usually what we think of as mind. Mind is like the thoughts in my head, the perceptions I have, the stories, the memories, the kinds of things I think about. Usually that's what we think of when we think of mind. And that is an aspect of mind. You could say that's an expression of mind. But there's an aspect of mind that is more foundational. It's like, that allows all of that to happen and to be known. And that's the aspect that we rest in or touch into as we're just aware with experience. That may not register to you as something. You may just be aware of thinking. Oh, now I'm aware of thinking. Or of reacting. Now there's this reaction happening. But as you let experience move on its own and stop interfering with it so much, but you stay aware. You stay awake. You start to notice an ease that is concurrent with experience. And the ease has to do with the relationship to what's happening, the relationship to the content of your own mind, the relationship with emotions or reactions. So freedom, then, is here and now, right in the midst of these conditions. Freedom is a function of what the mind is doing. I guess that's big M, mind, or big H, heart. Because in these traditions, mind and heart are the same word. We were talking about that a little in the intensive. So sometimes people hear mind and it seems their association to that is a little cold or dry. But if we say heart, that has a different connotation. And so we say, the heart knows the movement of the heart. We say, mind knows the movement of mind. So that can sound a little bit dualistic too, right? But you will start to know the freedom just as you can see things coming and going. You notice a thought arises, and it's like a world is born, and you watch it play out, or your life all of a sudden takes this shape because you're thinking about it a certain way. And if you can stay with it, you can watch it exist for a while, watch the whole world conform to it, and you can watch it fade away, and then it's gone. And there's just this. And then another thought arises, and the world takes another kind of shape. We want to watch this again and again. You want to actually investigate your own mind. So the purpose of this group, as I see it, it's a practice group. And when you come each week, my feeling about it is that hopefully you've been practicing, you've been watching your own mind for a whole week. You've been developing some meditative stability, and you've been exploring this. Then we can gather. I can say some things just to remind us what we're doing. And then we can talk about it. We can talk about what you're noticing. We can talk about what the challenges are of practicing this way. We can talk about what are the things that that really do seem like this is me. Actually, I found me, and this is what it is. And we can dialogue with that. We can dialogue about your doubts. We can dialogue about what you're skeptical of. That's really important. That's the function of having a teacher or a coach or in some tradition in our, insight tradition taught a spiritual friend, right? But the purpose of that is to unpack and to work through some of the challenges of doing this, because it's not trivial. I mean, there's very few people are really introspecting in this kind of way, in a systematic way, in a rigorous way. So again, that's the function of us meeting like this. But I want you to be interested in what's happening here. So we'd say, the heart knows the movements of heart, or just as we know sense experience and can be aware of it in real time, contact through the sense doors, we can be aware in real time of contact in the mind door. The future that I'm afraid of was not happening until I thought it. As soon as I'm thinking about tomorrow, tomorrow's appearing. When that thought goes away, tomorrow goes away. Experientially. It was never here, actually. And tomorrow is not here. Is that true? A few people are nodding. Some of you are giving me a quizzical look. And same with the past. The past is arising right here in the present as memory. So it takes a little cultivation to be able to notice this in real time, but that's what practice is at the sense doors. We want you to practice in real time at the sense doors. That's how we can take it off of the cushion. So that means just 360 experience, mind, the body, and all of it is happening right now. This is not actually that complicated. It just takes a little interest and ongoing engagement. But watch the mind door. Pay attention to contact in the mind. That can change your relationship to what's happening. Even to know conceptually, what I'm thinking and the way things are may not be the same. What I'm experiencing may be a story more than reality. So much of what people are experiencing so much of the time is not what's actually happening, but their story about it. And that doesn't mean it's bad to have a story. Stories are fine. They can be inaccurate. And they can be very limited. So it's just good to be aware when that's happening. You don't have to make it go away. Right? If I didn't have any story about any of you, I might not know what you told me last week. But that's different than thinking you are my story about you, or the story I've put together. Because we're always doing that. And one of the nice things about getting to know people in a deeper way is that you can watch the stories you had shift and change and start to break down a little bit. When you get to know yourself in a deep way, you will watch all your stories break down. All of them. And rather than that being a disaster, it's incredibly liberating. And that doesn't mean you forget your life or that you lose something. So we talked about this in the intensive Sangha too. It doesn't mean you lose anything. You usually don't lose anything, except you lose a belief in something that was inaccurate. You just lose that sense of limitation of living inside of a thought construct or a story about yourself or about other people. So it's like space opens up. It's like so one of the teachings that I was referenced the other night when I was talking about the aggregates is the teaching about feeling tone, about how every moment of sense contact, you see something, you hear something, you smell something, there's a feel something in the body, and when you think something, there's a feeling tone that goes with it. And that's either pleasant or unpleasant or neither. So that's another good thing you can notice with contact through the mind. Or a thought arises, notice whether the thought has a pleasant or unpleasant valence to it. And just be aware with that pleasantness or the unpleasantness, or the neither. Because that's part of what helps set up your reaction to it. Either you're kind of, let's go with that thought, or let's double down on it, or you're pushing it away, rejecting it, trying to get away from it. So much of that has to do with that valence. So, some degree of stable presence cultivated through moments of awareness and watching the mind. And now we can talk about watching the mind. We can talk about what you notice when you're watching the mind. What you're learning and what is confusing. Because if there's anything that's clear, it's that having a mind is not so straightforward. And nobody came in with like a user manual. And people aren't handing out a user manual either. So it can be a thicket in here. And a lifetime of conditioning that you're working with, that you're sitting with. And sometimes that's what brings people to practice. It's like this, a lifetime, or depending on your view of that, multiple lifetimes. just, you could say, like the genetic inheritance of conditioning. And so it is not, even though when I'm teaching, I try to make it simple. I make it sound simple so you can understand how to practice. I know there's nothing simple about sitting, or nothing easy, or kind of flippant about sitting with your own mind and body. I know that's asking a lot. Because there is a lot built up, and there's a lot of accumulated experience that sometimes is like residing right here in the body. Remorse, regret, grief, fear, trauma, and storms of thinking, or doubt, or just kind of deluded frameworks that, you grow up in an environment where people are living inside of some deluded framework, and that would include most people. You grow up in this thing. And so part of what you're doing when you're practicing is you're not just liberating yourself from like, oh, these are my little thoughts. You're liberating yourself from human history, from conditioning, from the past. I think that's very noble, right? And also quite a gift to maybe to successive generations to have dealt with some of that inheritance a little bit. Even just a little bit is a big deal, right? To not, to not perpetuate some of the delusion, some of the narrow fear conditioning, some of the prejudice or racism or limiting views. I think that's a profound benefit. So that also connects what I was saying before about when we're practicing. Even if we're practicing to liberate ourselves, it is in the service of others. In a way, it can't help but be if you're working with this condition. And if you're attending to dealing with this condition, it can't help but benefit others. And I think and so that's part of what's heartening about sitting here and looking out at the room with people who, however well or poorly you feel like you're doing this, are actually sitting here, being with your own experience and looking at your own life. Right? So it's very moving to watch that. Even though I know for many people, like, well, I'm just thinking the whole time, or I don't know how to meditate. Think about the people that you wish would for 5 minutes sit with themselves and just try to see anything. There's a long list of people like that. I'm sure for every one of you. But think of what an act of kind of goodness that would seem like to you, or what an act of hope, how hopeful that would seem. Somebody wanting to attend to their own condition, even if they haven't made any quote-unquote seeming progress. Just that intention is really beautiful. To get past, or to try to move through some of our kind of really limiting impulses. Just the conditioning to get as much as you can, or just the conditioning that other people's happiness is somehow taking something away from you. Just these small things are not small things, they're just endless criticizing that's bi-directional. Like cutting other people down and cutting yourself down. Just that kind of conditioning. Anyway. So wonderful. wonderful. We have a room of people who are brave enough to sit with themselves. And more than a room, we have rooms and rooms full of people. So let's dialogue a little bit and talk about what questions you are. Again, like I said, let's keep it close to the practice, but let's also bring your doubts, bring your skepticism. Because it's good to have a place to put that. You know, you're running up against something. It's good to have a place to put that. You can give that to me. You can put it into the room. Yeah, and I'll probably repeat what you say just so that others can hear. Yeah, but if you could speak up, that'd be awesome.
This isn't too vague of a question, but I was
Too vague?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was recently reading Murty's The Central Philosophy of Buddhism, which strongly advocates for a Madhyamika interpretation of the canon texts.
This is who were you reading? Krishnamurti?
Just Murty.
Oh, okay.
His first name.
Okay.
But I was curious if you had any commentary on the Madhyamika, or at least even in general, future interpretations of the canon texts that don't necessarily pertain to the original intent behind it.
So you're asking a question about Madhyamika and what I think of it?
Yeah.
I don't have any opinion because it's not a lineage that I'm practiced in. There's so many different streams of Buddhist tradition, as you know. That's why you're asking about it. But that's not one that I know of it, but I'm not in a, I can't comment in any kind of useful way on that. Yeah. What I've read of that framework, I like. Yeah, but yeah, it's like, this is a bad analogy, but people are really into different kinds of exercise. It'd be like asking somebody about a kind of exercise they don't do. And everybody has an opinion, so I could have an opinion, but for me it wouldn't be an informed opinion. Yeah, or a practice one. Yeah. But if you're asking in terms of like you and your practicing, like which strain of a tradition to follow, I think it's good to check out a few different teachers and some different teachings and see what really resonates for you. Because all of these paths, they're all good. Like the different, even just more simply break it down, Vajrayana, Mahayana, Theravada, early Buddhist stuff, they're all good. They're all different. Zen, Tom, it's all good. But you want to find a teacher you resonate with and the teaching that for some reason you can hear. Yeah. That'd be my advice. Rather than deciding what's the best one, which is the best one for me. Yeah. Because every Buddhist school thinks what they're doing is the best. This is what I have discovered. And also having practiced in a few different traditions. And they all have similar critiques of each other, which is kind of funny. Usually it's, they're just doing shamatha, But everybody says it every way. They're just doing concentration. Yeah. It's cool that you're reading my down. Great. Yes, please.
What's the best way, what are the ways to deal with boredom? Because a lot of times when we can't sit a long time, it's because boredom has arisen.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your...
So that question was about how to deal with boredom?
Yeah.
I'm too bored to answer that. So boredom,
Restlessness.
I've said this a lot in here. Boredom is usually the result of not connecting. It's at least in my experience, it's a function of the quality of attending. It's not about what's happening, even though it doesn't seem that way. So people often say like, oh, that was boring. And say, well, why was it boring? And usually it's because they couldn't connect with it. You know, like some things are boring for you that I find fascinating. You know, somebody, you explain some mathematical concept, and others just, they fog over. Some people, the Dharma's like that. Say like, oh, what's the meditation stuff about? And I'll like literally, it's like socially. You know, I'll start saying a few things, you just watch them. You probably all experience this if you tell people about magic. Wow. So you just stop talking right away. But so some of that's, you could say, well, they're not interested in that. You know, but another way of looking is like, sometimes being, like say you're a math teacher, your job then is to make it so that whoever you're talking to can connect with it a little bit, or you're trying to do that. But what we don't intend to notice is that it's, what makes it boring enough is whether you're able to connect with it with your intention. So that's why meditative training can change our relationship to boredom, because we're actually training in connecting with experience. So it's good to not have the story that like the breath is boring. Because for people who start meditating, the breath seems boring. Right? Because it's like, of all the interesting things I could pay attention to, my breathing is not on the list. I don't think there's actually anybody who hears that instruction. Pay attention, feel the sensations as you breathe in and breathe out. That's like, awesome. Why didn't I think of that? Let's watch the breathing. You know? Even if you say watch the mind, which once you get a little concentrated is super interesting. At least for a while, until it gets really boring. In the sense that on a content level, it's the same stuff happening over and over again. So that's a good kind of boredom that happens. Separate topic. But when you're paying attention to breathing, it's not going to be the same over time. We want you to connect with the breathing again and again, so to really feel it. And what will start to happen is that the breath will start to become vivid and dynamic, until there's so much happening in a breath. Why? It's a function of the quality of attending, engagement. And that quality of attention, we start to be able to access in relation to all kinds of things that didn't used to be on the radar. It's like all kinds of stuff that didn't seem important all of a sudden become very alive, like life. Like just ordinary experiences. Really vivid. I remember the phase when I really started practicing in the beginning, where I felt like I had gotten a prescription. I remember just, I was in Massachusetts, just looking at a pile of snow, just going, standing out, all this texture. Right? I was just looking at a chair, a woven chair, and this chair is just, right? I had not experienced like that before. Ordinary experience becomes very vivid. The life starts to come alive as a function of attention. So that's one piece I'd say, is that it's just good to have that framework for what can happen. But boredom may still arise in the process. So when you feel bored, that's a mind state, you know, and you can watch that. So I was talking about watching the mind. That's called boredom, a mind state. A state of mind, just like boredom could be like that. Loneliness is a mind state. You know, so when next time you're feeling lonely. Feeling lonely. It's like a combination of loony and lonely. Which kind of makes sense, actually. So, but next time you're feeling lonely, watch it. You know, bring interest to that state. Oh, can I watch loneliness as a state and notice what it's like? Just that changes your relationship to it. So, as a practitioner, there's a weird phase when you start to experience things that you would normally find aversive, and some part of you is like, oh, good. Because then you get to observe it. Oh, good. That sense of, there's something I'm missing and I don't know what it is. Right? Instead of going out and looking to fill it, like, oh, there's that state. So boredom is a great state to watch. And again, that's that paradoxical part. If you're interested in watching the state of boredom, those two things can coexist. Interest in the state of boredom and the state of boredom is still there, or still here. So that's fun. And you can do that with any kind of state. You can watch sleepiness, get sleepy. You can watch anger, get angry. And then there's sort of like two things happening simultaneously. Interest and awareness and a state. That alone will start changing your relationship to everything, actually. So, yeah, boredom is a good one. And people experience a lot of it when they're practicing. And it's really important to know it's not in the object. You know? Like when you find somebody boring, well, there are different aspects to that. Right? So that's actually more complicated. Sometimes people are boring, but it's because they're actually inhibiting their experience. So they are bored. And then you kind of experience that. You experience them being cut off. And so that registers a certain way. So that's a little more complicated. It's like interpersonal. Yeah. And so that's not just you. Sometimes you're actually picking up what's happening for the other person. It's like, I've got all this stuff going on. I'm not going to deal with any of it. And then you start feeling bored as the person interacting. And sometimes that's just because that's what's happening. So we won't get too into that.
So I'm not 100% sure what my question is, but I've noticed that I've been practicing like 5.5 years or so, and I noticed that I've started using it in more like applied way, rather in a way that doesn't necessarily feel like Buddhist, in the sense of like whatever this 45 minutes is, I will be there. It's like, oh, I have a certain kind of feeling. I think about a 30-minute meditation would help me feel better, like help me feel more relaxed or more calm or something like that. Help me like process this thing. And that doesn't really feel super Buddhist, you know what I mean? Because to me, like the Buddhist.
What does Buddhist feel?
Buddhist is like, I have this regular practice at this regular time, and no matter what I do it, and I feel what it feels like to want to have it be a certain way, and I just practice, I like notice that. And so this morning, for example, I was kind of doing the strategizing, of like, well, how long should I meditate? I have time. Okay, I'll do 45 minutes. But I was like, ooh, but I'm not sure that's the right amount of time for me to feel the way I want to feel. So like I set my timer for 45 minutes, and then like a certain amount of time in, I was like, oh, I want to stop now. And I was like, do I actually stop or do I continue? And I had enough like practice in me to be like, why don't you just feel what it's like to think you made a mistake, or what does it feel like to want to stop? I don't know, but it kind of makes me nervous that I'm like moving away from the practice and ending up just doing things that like feel. I mean, it feels like helpful.
I think you're raising a couple of different things that I think are both would be good to talk about. The first one is the Buddhist part. I was thinking if it doesn't feel Buddhist, that's probably a good thing. You know? Only because awareness isn't Buddhist, right? In a way, sometimes as practice feels more like it's yours, it will feel less like a thing, like some foreign thing, right? So it's like, oh, you know, really present with my son. This doesn't feel particularly Buddhist. I wouldn't have that thought normally, but I could add that thought. This doesn't feel particularly Buddhist. No, it doesn't. Awareness is not particularly Buddhist. It's actually important. Awareness is aware. That's non-denominational. Right? I don't think that's different depending on what set of beliefs you subscribe to or what set of practices you do. So in my view of what the Buddha was about, it was about discovering things about your nature, doing a direct first-person introspection, using meditative technology as a means for investigating at a level that's not ordinarily available to people just when they're caught up in everything, and discovering something about your own nature. So that's not particularly Buddhist. So I think that point is important on its own. But I think you're actually also talking about another thing, which is, and just from your description, tell me if it's wrong, you're practicing because awareness is helpful, and the practice is helpful, and it helps you get through certain things. And I think that's a really fine application of it. But I think you're on to something that it's limiting to just use it that way. You know, just like as a helpful tool. Because it's much deeper than that. And so I think that's the value and the benefit in practicing in a way that's not just about trying to feel a certain way. Because if you, and I've talked about this in here, you probably heard me, if you practice a lot, you will feel worse sometimes. Sometimes that's a sign of progress. Actually in anything. You know, sometimes you get to a certain place you're comfortable. If you keep practicing, that will break down. And that's a good thing, because that means it's deepening or growing or developing. Just like development, human development is not this, you just feel better and you feel more and more capable. Right? Right? You know, no, people go through all these phases where like the teenage years or where you're actually developing quite rapidly, but it feels totally chaotic and maybe less, you know, where if you have children at that age, you're like, what happened, you know? Everything was going along, and then you became a teenager. And it seems like a reversal, you know, but it's not, that's development. So anyway, it's a limited metaphor, but I think that's the reason to not, you want to do what you're doing and practice in a way where it's like, I'm not going to stop just when I feel better. It's like, oh, stay, like, but I think the thing you were doing was really interesting. It was like noticing the impulse to stop. That's a great thing to notice and sit through. Just the impulse to stop, because sometimes that'll arise when you get a little bored, or it gets a little uncomfortable, or you feel like I did enough. That's why usually I encourage people to sit, at least for a while, for like a certain period of time. It's usually a little longer than you want to, you know, like 45 minutes or 40 minutes, so that you get to the point where you're done and it's not time. That's super valuable, because all day long you get to points where you're done, but you're not done. So you want to really practice moving through that, or moving with that phase. So it doesn't have to be feel Buddhist, and I think the way you're applying practice to your experience is great, and keep going. Yeah, that kind of that aspect of rigor can be helpful. Yes.
So as I've started practicing more,
Can you speak up a tiny bit?
as I've started practicing more, I've been able to kind of attune to like a sensation that's not pleasurable, maybe that's happening and it's physical. But sometimes it can be pretty difficult to determine what it's attached to, or that it might almost just stem from like a feeling of really intense awareness.
So let me just make sure I understand something. So you're saying you've been practicing and you're at a place where you can notice kind of a strong sensation when it's present, and you can be present with it.
Oftentimes outside of the context of meditation,
Okay.
just in day-to-day life.
In daily life.
And feeling maybe almost a physical sensation. Sometimes it's not pleasurable and painful enough. It's difficult for me to determine, and it's kind of new. I'm experiencing a new level of this. It seems to be underlying thoughts that I'm having.
Is it a particular feeling that you're talking about right now, or just feelings in general?
It's a kind of particular feeling, but it almost seems to be on the surface level a symptom of being very kind of aware of maybe my condition or something.
So it's a feeling that arises that's not particularly pleasant or unpleasant.
It's often unpleasant.
It's often unpleasant,
But not, again, difficult to deal with.
but not difficult to do. But it seems to arise in conjunction with states of heightened awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Can you say anything else about it? Like
It's just, it's
what do you, where do you feel it? What
oftentimes in my chest.
in your chest?
Yeah.
Yeah. And does it feel like a tightening or a?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Often it can be a tightening. But yeah, the thing
Yeah, it's harder to see what this is connected to in terms of the outer stuff. It's not like you said something and I had this feeling in my chest. It comes spontaneous.
And often, it's not reacting to something specifically.
Yeah.
But it seems to always come when I'm maybe more aware.
Yeah. And how would you describe the sensation? And I know it's hard to, but
Just
like-
kind of like maybe a sharp feeling in my chest. Physically.
yeah. So feeling in chest, some of the sharp feeling. I'll say something at maybe at two levels. One is, it's not a problem. If you have, in states of heightened awareness, if you have certain strange physical sensations, or that you don't ordinarily have, that are related to that, whether you're sitting in meditation or just a lot of weird, for lack of a more technical term, a lot of weird things can happen when you're very concentrated and or very aware. So I'll just say a couple things generally, and I don't know exactly if this is in that category, but there are some physical sensations that just come with phases of concentration. And sometimes those are like tingling in the body, a sense of like chills through the body, or sometimes it can be like pressure. And that's actually a function of a certain quality of engagement. There's a technical term for that in like meditative texts and stuff, but that part doesn't matter. So just to say that as you practice, and this is true for all of you, you may have all kinds of weird physical things happening, pressure in the head, or seizing in different parts of the body, or sometimes you become aware of bodily tension that seems like it comes about because you're meditating, but actually it was there all the time. So it's like a different category. It's like all the holdings or energetic knots in the body that you're usually too distracted to notice, they can get lit up. And then you're sort of like, oh, whenever I meditate, I feel all these things. That seems negative. But it's actually a good thing. And so, could be any of this. Whatever it is, the way to relate to it is the same, which is just include it. And notice if you start making a story out of it, which is very common. Like, all experience has a painful part. Or, this is the stabbing of reality. I'm not saying you're making that up, but people can make all kinds of stuff. Or I had a knot in my chest for like a year. And then when I meditate and do my retreats, I have this energetic knot in my chest. I was just like, and despite all the instructions and all the teachings I got, I totally made an identity out of it. Like, this is my karmic obstacle. This is the physical constellation of all of my clinging and conditioning. And as soon as I can liberate myself from this knot, I will really be free, but I can't. And I never will. So that kind of thing can happen. It doesn't sound like, hopefully it's not happening yet, or maybe it is. If it is, maybe it's pretty helpful. But all of that is extra. And then you'll notice it will change and stuff over time. But don't sacrifice the awareness because it comes with some weird things sometimes. And physical things can be really happen with those kinds of states. Sometimes people make kind of weird movements that happen, kind of weird energetic movements, or like lurching and stuff like that. All kinds of stuff. Does that feel like it's in the neighborhood of? Yeah. Okay, yeah. If you have any other questions about it, you can feel free to ask ones. I would call it in the domain of normal. But don't always assume it will accompany awareness, because that may change too, and it may change tomorrow. Okay? So, or it may change Sensation of tension?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I just, in my like morning practice, which I usually do laying down, what feels like I sort of become aware of just extraordinary tension all over my body, like like a rubber band ball, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in this sort of like, be with it as it is and include it, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, there's parts of it that feel a little bit hard to do, it just depends.
Yeah.
But as I, am with it, things start to move.
Yeah.
Like, there's actually like, my legs are kind of moving and,
Mm-hmm.
occasionally it'll start to like shake or
Yeah.
tremor.
Mm-hmm.
Which I have a good idea kind of what that's about and things releasing.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point it feels like I have to make a choice about it because my nervous system starts responding in a way that's like, it's getting kind of excited and overwhelmed and it's just like, feels, feels like that's, what it wants to do, like things are unraveling and
Uh-huh.
releasing, but it's like too much.
Too much,
It's
yeah.
a very fine threshold. It's like,
Okay.
I don't know what to do with the making a choice when there's like, the be as it is, be with it as it is.
Sure, sure. So I'll say something brief about it just because we're kind of out of time. I didn't realize the time. And then if you want to talk more, we can talk more afterwards. Okay, I'm happy to do that. But just something brief about that is that whenever the body or the nervous system is having a process, which it sounds like it's happening, you're aware and things are unwinding internally, and that feels kind of good in a way, or right, even if it doesn't feel pleasant. Feels like that's what the system is wanting to do. When it gets overwhelming in a way that stops, that kind of intuitively you know it's not useful, that's the time to shift, to do something else, or to put your attention somewhere else, so that you're not, be with it as it is not like a sentence. You're not sentenced to being with things as they are. We're practicing learning how to skillfully be in relationship and skillfully navigate our mind and body, our human experience. So that's especially important with the nervous system, or that kind of overwhelm. So yeah, so sometimes you put your attention in some part of the body that feels still, like your toe. Sometimes you can go to hearing, something very expansive, or feel the floor, something very solid, or you can get up and make contact with the environment. I think that's actually very important to listen to. You don't need to do everything at once when you're practicing, right? So it's not like, I gotta be with this and work through it. Sometimes people have that kind of sense of urgency. And I would just say, trust your intuitive sense of when it's overwhelming in a not useful way, and then move. And move your body, shift what you're doing with your intention. You can pendulate sometimes between an overwhelming experience. We've talked about this before, I think, between an overwhelming experience and something that's more safe feeling or stable. And I think, that's really important to play with. Okay, so let's just kind of formally close for tonight. And I hope that you will take whatever we've done tonight and practice with it through the week. Right, so that this weekly meeting is like a touch point in your week. But the meat of the content is actually happening for you in your exploration. And it can be supportive to know that you're not the only one doing that there are all these other people who are engaging with their own minds, different conditioning, but same kind of territory, different particulars. That can also be supportive, just remembering your kind of fellow practitioners. So may each one of us, in our own way, continue to look deeply into the nature of things, and to look deeply into our own heart and our own mind. And may we be willing, with the support of our practice, to see things as they are and to meet things as they are. And may this benefit not only ourselves, but also hopefully by extension, all beings everywhere.